Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. I don't want to talk about the Bills game today. Just kidding.
Don't need to.
Yeah. Well, you can't talk about the Jets game because there was no Jets game.
They didn't lose. They're a game out of first. That's good with me.
Can't lose if you don't play.
That's right.
All right, start us off with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So a new free agent's going to hit the baseball free agent market. Kodai Senga. I saw him pitch in the Olympics last year. He was pretty good. He's 29, a right-hander. So far, the Giants seem to be the main team after him, but it's reported that maybe the Angels, Red Sox, Rangers, Blue Jays, Mariners, Cubs, Dodgers, and Padres have interested in him too.
So what you're saying is this is our first pick in our baseball.
Oh yeah, I'm putting Kevin Allen on notice right now. We're getting this guy, so don't even think about it. But just it's fun when a guy like this comes out because there's always speculation. I'll tell you one of the most jaw-dropping moments I ever had as like a fan. When I was at a Mets Red Sox game in Fenway, and the Mets had just signed. Oh crap! Now what's the Japanese pitcher's name that played? Hideo Nomo. Nobody reported it, and all of a sudden we look up and there's Hideo Nomo walking over in a Mets uniform, strolling across the field because we were at the game pretty early, and I was like, "When did the Mets get Nomo?" And and I was like he was one of those pitchers that had all that mystique and was a pretty damn good pitcher, and so now there's another one. And I kind of like that guy.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always been a great mystique about the players coming over, although it's kind of lost its luster in recent years simply because we haven't had, kind of the impact players that we used to get, but it's still fun, because it feels like you're getting something for nothing, you're not, so it's always good. And it seems pitchers are always the thing. So
my worry is always he's 29. How many pitches did he actually throw over there? Yeah. That's always the thing because they don't have pitch counts like Major League Baseball. These guys work a lot harder.
Well, their rotation is every 6 days. That's the other thing.
Okay, so they got to break that way.
Right. So, I mean, I know that was like when Tanaka came over with the Yankees, that was always the concern. Well, he's going to be going into a 5-man rotation, and they're used to a 6-man rotation. So, it didn't seem to give him any major problems. But, yeah,
Tanaka was done. Like, he was done, Mike.
What do you mean?
Injury-wise. Like, when it came up, even though he never got the surgery, he was never the same guy again.
He wasn't the same, but he was still an effective starter. And I was just looking it up because it sprung to mind when you were talking about this pitcher, because Tanaka left in 2020, and I thought there was a chance maybe he comes back to Major League Baseball, but apparently he was done playing in the U.S. because I guess some perceived racial discrimination. I never picked up on it with the Yankees.
I never picked up on that. Wow.
Yeah, the Yankees always. I mean, that's interesting, but
here's something though. I just looked it up, Kev. The most innings he has ever pitched, the pitcher we're talking about, Senga, is 144 last year. That's the most innings he's ever thrown.
Jeez,
it's a different world.
It really is.
All right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, November 14th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eklund will be joining us in a little bit. Unfortunately, again, we start with injury news.
A lot of injuries out there.
A lot of injuries out there, and Columbus seems to be the focal point of like serious injuries. First they lose Werenski last week, Kevin, and it's out for the season. And now they just get Patrick Laine back, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and we saw him walking into the building with that ridiculously ugly suit that he was wearing. And now he suffered a sprained ankle, and he's out for another 3 to 4 weeks. This guy just can't stay healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad, too, because, I've talked about this before, but, he played well in the second half of last season. And, they've got the Werenski loss was so devastating for that team. And, now they're a prime contender in the Bedard sweepstakes. And, I don't see them digging out of that whatsoever. Like, what's the hope there? And
I thought maybe they could with just Werenski, and they could maybe fill that gap. But now with Line too, no way.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't think their defense without Werenski is even. That's a tough division, as you well know. So I just couldn't see them doing it. But
I think they have a lot of threes and fours. They, Jake Bean, Boquist, Gavrikov. I mean, they're not bad. They're just not good enough.
Yeah, no, but yeah, that's well put. But I was looking at this. I was on for another show. I made a list of the bottom teams in the league again. Mm-hmm. There's some real surprises here. I mean, here we are. I mean, it's still early, but Anaheim, which we all expected, and then Columbus, and those are legitimate bottom teams simply based on like goal differential. Like it's bad enough that their records are terrible, but the Ducks and Columbus are a combined minus 49 together. But then there's the St. Louis Blues, and the thing that's alarming to me again is goal differential. They're already at minus 17, for the thing. And then Vancouver, I still feel Vancouver's coming around a little bit. Like I still think they're going to be okay, but we'll see.
I saw them on Saturday, Kev. They played their backup Spencer Martin against the Leafs in Toronto, and they took a 2-0 lead, and then Toronto bounced back and won 3-2. But really, I mean, their defense. I mean, Quinn Hughes. He's pretty good.
Yeah.
Tyler Myers is woeful as a $6 million defenseman, and they've got patchwork guys like Ethan Bear and Luke Shen. They're just not a good defense, and they're sort of top heavy offensively. If those big guys don't score, they're in deep trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to a pro scout about them, and he made the obvious but noteworthy observation is that they brought Jim Rutherford there because of his reputation of being able to, regardless of cap situations, to make improvements on the team. And he's going to have to work some magic to get another defender because, their offense is decent. I think I like Thatcher Demko quite a bit. So, if they can do that, if they could somehow engineer a trade, and Rutherford has made those trades in the past. So,
sure.
We'll see. But the one thing I wanted to bring up was, and this is to me significant, of the bottom teams, Nashville's in that group too at 6-8-1. They're all nutty minus goal differential teams except one, the Ottawa Senators.
Right.
The Ottawa Senators are basically an even team.
Yeah.
And, I think that says something about them. I mean, I think it does say that, we were kind of right about that team in terms of
they're better, but they're just,
There's
yeah.
more there. Yes.
Yeah, there is more there. And I think, the Cam Talbot return is going to help them over the long run. So if there is a team in that mix that, maybe can start clawing out, maybe it's Ottawa. But
here's my worry. My worry is I think there's more teams near the bottom than I ever imagined, and I don't think they're all trying to get Connor Bedard. I think there's 8 or 9 teams by the end of the year that are going to be out of it kind of early, like not by the end of the year, but will be out of it kind of early. And that is a little worrisome for me.
Yeah, maybe you're right too. Maybe by the end of the year, like if you're still at the end of December and you're, down near the bottom, that's no longer a hot or cold situation.
No,
that's a trend. So
something really interesting happened, guys, along those lines is that, I've been doing some research on this and trying to come up with like mathematical numbers about it, which I know, kind of hurts my brain a little bit. But the reality is that since the cap has not gone up, each year parity has withered away. I don't know if you noticed this, like the parity is going. And you would think, I would kind of think it would be the opposite.
It did wither away last season early. You're right.
And that's because
each year though, you've had bigger disparities every year and you would think with the cap the same, you would think when the cap goes up that better teams would get better still, but and you would think their parity would actually even out, but the opposite effect is
it's because 32 teams, there's such inflexibility in the market right now, that really teams that are one piece away, they really have to do contort themselves to be able to make moves. And the teams that are at the bottom, they can't make the big move to improve. Now, I just looked it up. there are 10 teams under 500 right now. Now,
Yeah,
500. What's that?
in hockey, that's a lot. I mean,
That's a
Yeah.
lot.
500 in hockey is not hard.
No.
Like real 500 is maybe, but for the most part, if you just look at wins and losses, 500, it's not that hard.
But just on Ottawa, because Kev brought them up. Yes, they did get Talbot back, and that's big for them. But Norris, who was supposed to be out for the year, may be back by mid to late January. So that's All-Star break. So that's encouraging. But then they lose Shabbat over the weekend, and they say it's a concussion, but they don't know how long. And we know and that defense is not very good without Shabbat. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jake Sanderson. The rest of the defense is average at best. And we had Jeff Merrick on Off the Post on Sunday, and we were talking about teams out there like Toronto, and we'll talk about them in a minute, St. Louis and Ottawa, who are looking for defensemen. And there's nobody, not even the bottom feeders, Kev, are trading defensemen on November 14th. None of them will do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. There's not really much going on. The only team that has players available seems to be the Montreal Canadiens, and everyone else is just kind of fishing around. So
one other, Winnipeg. Winnipeg apparently has 11 defensemen, and they're looking to trade some of them. But
yeah, I'm hearing Winnipeg is kind of excited about where they're at, and they don't want to do anything impulsive.
It's crazy to change anything right now. I mean, they've caught the lightning in the bottle at this point.
Well, here's the other scary thing I would say about these teams at the bottom, Mac. They're not all teams that have cap space.
No,
right.
Not at all. No,
and that's what's bad for the
no one
league.
has cap space, to be honest. I mean, only a few teams do have cap space. And the teams that have cap space are the teams that generally don't spend the cap. Like Nashville, or is a team that has cap space. But these teams, like, they don't have, and even Nashville doesn't have a lot of cap space compared to where they normally are. But that's because obviously the cap hasn't gone up for many years, so everything is evening itself out, right? So what's happening is what we're seeing now, based on decisions that were made right around COVID, because the teams haven't changed all that much, with the exception of a few teams have changed a lot, but most of the teams have they haven't been able to make drastic changes because there's nowhere to go.
Well,
so that's what you're seeing. You're actually seeing some of these GM decisions come to fruition or not, more than we usually do, because usually you can self-correct things along the way, I feel. And I feel that this year you can't do that.
The teams that have cap space now are the teams that are relying on LTIR. And I was going to bring up Toronto, and the news came out today, and it's not exactly unexpected because there was little or no news coming out about Jake Muzzin, that he's out indefinitely with a cervical spine injury, and that it's going to be looked at again in late February. Just coincidentally, late February is about a week before the trade deadline. So I think they want him back, obviously, but if it's a spine injury, connected to concussions, connected to shoulder problems,
the odds of him coming back are nil.
So they're going to clarify their position probably a week before the trade deadline. And that if he is out for the rest of the season, then Kyle Dubas has $5 million in LTIR money to play with in terms of making a deal. I've heard from somebody that Toronto doesn't want to trade for a rental. They want to trade for somebody who's got term left, because they figure if we're going to pay a first-round pick or a high price, we'd rather have somebody who's there for multiple years instead of a rental. But the rental market is going to be interesting, and there are a few players out there that I think could help them. But if somebody tells you that the Leafs are interested in John Klingberg, hang up on them, because they're not. They're not interested in that type of defenseman.
When does that, I won't hang up on them.
Well, all right, but Mike,
Mike Agella does not agree with you.
I know. Here's what I'm going to have to tell you, Mike. What you're saying about getting a defenseman with term sounds great.
Yeah.
You've got 6-7 teams going after defensemen, and Kyle Dubas at some point is going to get desperate. He may have to get in a perfect world, Russ, you're right. I mean, if they have to get a rental, then they'll get a rental. But I think ideally they want to get somebody who has term left. And I know
in the perfect world they get somebody with term left. But the opposite, Mike, right? Because this is not a perfect world, obviously. So they'd have to go to get a rental. I mean, this is they are going to have. They don't want and every team wants players with term. If they're going to give up a first round draft pick, you don't want like Florida last year with with Sherratt and Giroux. You don't want to give up first round draft picks for guys that aren't going to come back.
Well, some teams, like, okay, and I'm using this as an example, but and not that I think that the Leafs would want Erik Karlsson or Vlasic because they can't accommodate those big salaries under the cap. But teams like San Jose, who are obviously in a rebuild, have defensemen who still have something left, but they have term left. They'd be willing to trade those guys and probably not get a ton in return for them. I think the first thing is Dubas may shop around to find a fit there. Because honestly, if Muzzin is not available for the rest of the year, I don't think he'll play next year either. I don't see him coming back.
No, I don't either.
So, but they have a lot of cap space that if that has to happen, then they can accommodate that. But I think he's looking for a deal like that before he's looking for a rental. And because the rental prices, as we know, are going to be ridiculous on Gostisbehere. And, if one of the New Jersey defensemen are out there, either Graves or who's Severson, all those defensemen are going to cost an arm and a leg. And they don't have the assets in terms of draft capital to make those type of
deals. See, I don't think anybody wants Vlasic, and we don't know if Karlsson wants to leave.
I was using that as an example.
Yeah. I'm just saying. But even a guy like Karlsson, he may not even want to leave. And then, the market's not going to be fantastic because defense is the one thing everybody needs, like Kevin had said the last show he was on. So the market's not going to be great. It's going to be the same guys out there. Justin Braun, you're going to be looking at the same defenseman that you were last offseason with maybe a couple added.
Yeah, that's funny. Hey, just going back to the list of the bottom teams, I wanted to bring this up because I thought about this. I was listening on Saturday. I had a long drive, and we had Sirius Radio on. They had hockey shows, and there was constant reference to the Bedard sweepstakes. And it reminded me of a conversation I had recently, and I was going to talk about a general manager saying, and I brought up and I said the Bedard sweepstakes. And I said it just in terms of, that's all you need to say, and then you are aware of that we're talking about the bottom teams. He goes, stop using that. He said, like general managers are not dumb. Like they know there's only a ridiculous chance of getting it. And I thought about, when Steve Yzerman fell in the draft from first to fourth. Well, first of all, he was ticked off. There's no question about that. Yeah. But he said, I've told my staff all season, the odds of getting number one, no matter how bad we are, the chances are it's more likely we're going to fall than we're going to say. Like we have to plan for that. Like that's the way it goes. Like that's what the percentages are. That's what the odds are. And I guess my point is, it's us in the media. We use that, but I doubt GMs are thinking, we're going to bottom out to get that. What they're thinking is we're going to get a really good player because there's a lot of them. But this idea that people are going for Bedard, I don't really think that's actually, the game plan. The game plan is we want to make sure we're in a position to get a really good player. This is a deep draft.
I think what I think along those lines, Kevin, is that what's different about this year maybe than last year when I talk to people is that they're saying there are 3 players better in this draft than anybody in last draft, for example, they'll say.
Yeah.
Well, that's not necessarily true. That's
what people are saying.
That's pushing it a little bit. I think.
Okay. But if you get one of those top 3 picks, which you're guaranteed, right? If you finish first or last or whatever, you're going to get one of those picks, right?
I'm not wrong in saying if you finish with the worst record and you lose the lottery, the lowest you can pick is 4th.
Okay, so that's
so if you don't get Connor Bedard and you don't get Fantilli and you don't get Mishkov, right? They're still going to, you're still going to get a really good player at 4.
I'm here to tell you after, watching the 5 Nations, you're going to be, if you're even at number 10, you're getting a really good player in this draft.
That's how much better is this draft, Russ, than last year?
It's better. I mean, it's it's better. Here's the thing. And the reason I don't like to talk about, well, how's this year's draft compared to last year's, compared to the current draft? Like last year, I didn't want to talk about this draft because I have a really good idea of like how the top 15, how strong that is. I don't have a really good idea yet how the second and third rounds might be. And that's what 2003 cleaned up in the second to the end of the draft. Like there were plenty of good first rounders, but there's a few that missed, but they cleaned up in the depth of a draft. So like, it depends what you call a better draft. Is this first round going to be better as a whole than last year's? Yes.
Right, here's what I consider a better draft. Yes.
I don't know.
Here's what I consider a better draft. And because I think we're at the point now where there's so many good young talented players in the first round every year. Like there's a great number of good young players in the first round every year, right? I bet in the first round, you're almost guaranteed to get an NHL player, like an NHL player that's going to play.
Nah, still percentages are telling you you're not.
Yeah.
Well, no, more than half the first round draft picks play in the NHL, right? I mean,
70% now. It's up to 70, which is the highest it's ever been.
Right, because I think that's because skill trainings and all this stuff has gotten better and better and better over the years. We are better players coming out.
But there's still going to be misses.
To me, yeah, but to me, how good a draft is really how good the sure things are in a draft. I'm going to throw that out. When I'm saying there are 3 sure things in this draft, and last year, how many sure things were there?
Well, I'll just.
Well, I mean, again, you're asking me to say, like, what's a sure thing? And I'm going to also tell you development has a lot to do with it, because I would have told you Nolan Patrick was a sure thing, and he was a sure thing. He made it to the NHL, but then other things happened. So, like, just making it's not good enough. Like for what you're wanting to get out of this.
I know, but I'm trying to quantify this somehow. And I know what you're saying. I get it.
Yeah, the way I could quantify it is this:
I have to talk about trades.
If you're picking in the top 10. I think the chances of getting a very good NHLer are 9 out of 10. Like odds are you're going to have one that's probably going to struggle.
What was your feeling of the last year's top 10?
Well, let me look at it because I don't memorize everything anymore.
No, I got it, Russ.
Would you say that
I got to look
going in? Did you think that 9 out of 10 was your chances?
Hold on, I'll tell you in a second.
Yeah. I mean, it just feels like there was so much confusion about who was first overall last year, and it feels like any one of these 3 guys.
Well, that confusion was on Montreal because they didn't like Shane Wright. So
right.
I mean,
but a couple other teams didn't either, Mike. So it's like,
I get. Well, no, I think it was one of those deals where, say New Jersey was locked in on Nemec, and they weren't gonna take a forward. He's
not like a guarantee. Like to me, like when I think of guarantees, I'm talking McDavid, Eichel, Matthews. I'm talking McKinnon. I'm talking these guys that we know going in, like Berard. Okay. These guys, they all feel like they're in that category too.
I will tell you this: the top 10 this year is definitely better. And even when you get to like 13, 14, 15 of last year, you'll be around 20 for the same kind of quality this year. But in this, like if I look at the top 15 for this last year, I can see there being like 2 to 3 misses.
I mean, based on the rules that were in place in, say, for example, 2015, where Buffalo was guaranteed Eichel if they didn't win the lottery because you could only drop down one. Tanking that year was a absolute no-brainer, and the fans were in on it. Now, right now, honestly, I mean, Kevin's right. The chance of getting the first pick is around 20%. There's no guarantee, but this draft is fairly top heavy in the fact that you're going to get a really quality player even at 3 or 4. So if your season is, if you're Arizona, if you're Chicago, and this season is clearly a rebuilding season, they've overachieved so far. I'm sorry. If I'm Bill Armstrong or I'm Kyle Davidson, when I have the opportunity, I kill this team. They have to finish.
The only problem is he's off to a good start, and we're talking about there being potentially 10 bad teams. Right. So you've got to be really sure your team is finished and used up before you enter into that.
Kevin, how much of you say, with the bottom teams, like you're looking at the 10 bottom teams or so. I've heard people already saying, well, it's okay. We might be in on the Bedard. The Bedard thing is like an excuse right now. Like, because people are saying, okay, well, don't panic. We might be in on Bedard now. I mean, but I think it's coming from other people.
I'm just looking at the odds right now. So, right now, Anaheim it's 25.5% that if you're last, that you'll end up with the first pick, which, and then, that you're going to land in the top 3 is 55%. So
now, I talked to a reporter who covers, the Kings and the Ducks, and he said that they're not going to fire Dallas Eakins. And to me, it sounds like a Jeff Blashill situation. It's like he's got a year left in his contract. If they finish dead last, it's actually a benefit. So why not let him finish? He's not a bad coach. He's not in terms of developing young players. But if they're going to go this way, what's the point of firing him unless Verbeek is going to bring in his next coach? There's a benefit to sucking right now, and why not?
I think the reason they're not firing him is you want to save that. Everybody, that you always get a coach firing when you're a new coach. You don't want to do it right away.
Right.
I'll tell you, I saw Verbeek out scouting, in Michigan. So, and he wasn't just sort of like, looking at guys. He was doing a little bit more than that, because there are some GMs that come out there and they're with their scouts and they're chatting and they're talking to players, but they're mostly looking. He was doing more than looking.
Yeah. It isn't, and you're right, Kevin, that the people don't want to fire coaches and bring in a new coach, because that is a move. That's a move that you can only make so many times.
Well, you only get one. You can always say, well, he wasn't my coach. So if you do that now, that's what I've heard, that he's gonna wait and
that energy of a new coach, you want that going in at a time that you want that energy.
Yeah.
And you really want that, like the Flyers not bringing Tortorella in until the beginning of the season, as opposed to bringing Tortorella in the middle of last season or something like that. It's like when things are going terrible, they could just go terrible again. They feel like they could wait for a while. We'll talk about Tortorella in a second, because he's getting
that's none of your business, Eklund.
I will say this, just to answer the chat room. I'm not telling you what my top 4 or 5 is right now, because I'm still forming it. In a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
I'll give you my first glimpse at it, but I'm not ready to do that yet.
That's cool, Rats. We like cheese. It's all right. It's good.
Not teasing. This is
I'm just saying.
I'm trying not to tease.
But you have to go to sportsology.com to
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when the time comes.
For sure.
Plug.
But no, for sure. I had an interesting discussion today with another GM about, actually assistant GM, about Vegas. And so we talked about what Vegas is doing right now. And his interesting thing was, because he watches the show. He's the guy who watches the show. And he saw how we were all last year. We were all just completely I said Vegas isn't going to make the playoffs. McCrimmon's terrible. It's also and that happened, and we saw that all happen, right? But he's like, but was it worth it? He said, was it he only had one chance to get Eichel, and if in getting Eichel you sacrifice a season, which is what he did, for the Vegas Golden Knights to be set up for a few years in a really strong way, is it worth it?
They'll find out.
And that is interesting.
But here'd be my argument.
Yeah,
I doubt they ever had that conversation. I don't think they thought that they had a chance to.
Yeah.
I think they thought, oh yeah, this is a no-brainer. I don't think they never thought in those terms. I would just guess, because not many people did.
Of course, right? Yeah, and Vegas was a perennial playoff team.
But
out there, it's true, but they were, right. So to them down
the thing is that for three seasons, their main pursuit was a number one defenseman. And this is not every franchise is looking for this, but the opportunity was a number one defenseman and a number one center. And they went and overspent to get Pietrangelo away from the Blues. And then when the opportunity presented itself to get Eichel, they didn't overpay. I think people in Buffalo are happy with what they got, and now Vegas is happy with what they got out of Eichel, because Eichel's playing very well. But that was the focus of that organization. That was what Kelly McCrimmon was looking for.
They mortgaged a lot. So in 3 years, their mortgage is going to start turning upside down if they don't.
My argument was also they didn't. The real reason that Eichel's playing amazing and all that stuff, and Pietrangelo's playing amazing, like you say. But the real reason right now that they're doing well was not what they planned in a Logan Thompson. That wasn't the plan. That they obviously.
I think that's true. Otherwise,
they obviously signed Leonard to a big contract.
They wouldn't have spent the money, right?
Right. So but Logan Thompson is probably the reason that they are where they are.
And Aiden Hill.
Aiden Hill, they're both playing great hockey. But I think the confidence that those guys have given them have brought Vegas back to a time of confidence, and when Vegas plays as a more confident team as opposed to a shaky team with goaltending,
we still don't really know about Logan Thompson. At game 50, you'll have a better idea.
Yeah. But I think I'd put it this way: if we polled NHL general managers of whether or not they would whether or not Vegas made a good trade or a bad trade, I would say the vast majority will say they made a good trade.
Yeah, but also these same general managers are the ones that are capped out too. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. These are competitive guys that end up doing.
No, I think the reality is
older players, Kev. So they end up doing more than even what they want to do in the end, because everybody else is bidding and they look at their chances and they to say, you know what, I'm pushing my chips to the table. More of these guys will push the chips to the table than won't.
I don't know how that even fits into my argument. I mean,
I don't think so.
I think the fact that that's the whole idea is.
Well, there's not much restraint. That's my point.
Well, there isn't that much restraint, but I think Vegas is a much better team, and I don't think they're going to miss the assets as much as, Jack Eichel is a real big difference maker, and we don't know that Vegas gave up any of those. I mean, they gave up a good hockey player that's helping Buffalo.
They gave up NHL talent. They didn't get. I don't think any of them are Eichel. I'll agree with you on that. But every trade that you do that, and you lose 2 NHL talent guys, there's a year where all of a sudden you're looking around and you got 5 spots to fill and no money.
I mean, I agree with that, Russ, if you're talking about like a Pacioretty trade, but we're talking about Eichel, but I'm
talking about cumulatively with this team.
Yeah, but on an Eichel trade, Kevin's right.
This is the last straw in a team that is still good, but has mortgaged everything.
I mean, and Eichel is still young.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I think you're wrong.
I talked to a team last year that was really doing well. It was one of the top teams in the league when Eichel was available. And they were like, there was no reason you would think they would ever trade for Eichel in a million years, right? But they're like, yeah, I would trade for Eichel if I could. That's the reality is, even though they were doing incredible well, like Kevin said, if you can get a player like a Jack Eichel,
yeah,
like a Jack Eichel.
You can rarely trade for a player like Jack Eichel, especially in the prime of his career. And, it was just a combination of factors. It was the messiness of the Buffalo situation and injury, the fact they didn't want to pay for the surgery. I mean, all those factors came together to make him available. And they were among the few teams that, and again, they were doing it at a time when nobody had any cap space, which limited the competitors.
And they were fortunate, Kevin, that St. Louis wouldn't agree to a signing bonus and a no trade clause with Pietrangelo, and that he chose them. So, in two senses, they've been fortunate. But the thing is that, I mean, we all said before the year, if they got competent, at least average goaltending, and if they stayed healthy, they were a playoff team, and they're doing much better than just that. They're getting above average goaltending, and everybody's healthy, and everything is going right for them right now.
Right. While everybody's healthy, everything is going to go right. They are razor thin in depth even now, and I don't know how much cap space or any if they'll have at the deadline.
Well, let me say this though: is their depth issue created by the Eichel trade, or the fact they really haven't drafted all that well?
Well, it's both. It's drafting, player development, but the Eichel trade's a part of it because they lost a number of players. So it is a part of it.
Right. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to the next 2 or 3 years, instead of having young guys come up in the organization like other teams that had draft picks, they're going to have to do what they did this year with a guy like Phil Kessel and get veterans to come in on $1 million, $750,000, $800,000 deals. And it will be easier for them to do that because it's like, if you build it, they will come. Veteran players will go there because it's Vegas and because they're going to have a chance to play with Eichel. It's like Toronto.
There's a team that's plays in their colors of blue and white that's been doing that for 2 or 3 years, and it's not working for them.
Well, Russ, I mean, come on. It has worked for them. It just doesn't work in the playoffs.
Well, but that's when it matters.
If Vegas is going well, Vegas has so much going for it because they not only are it's obviously an incredible place to live. The suburbs of Vegas are really nice.
Yeah, definitely, there will be players that will sign those deals for sure.
Yeah, and there's no pressure to play in Vegas. There's not like a Toronto media. In Vegas.
There is pressure.
There's pressure, but it's not like a Toronto media. Okay, it's different. It's a different situation. Like we talk about Toronto and Vegas.
It's gonna wear off like anywhere else. Like if we turn around and it's 5 years down the line and they haven't won a cup and things are slipping a little, it's going to be like any other market at that point.
But every team in the NHL has those 7 or 8 guys that are at the bottom of the roster that are making under $1 million. That's part of the deal. That's why, when you talk to GMs, they tell you, it's a $90 million. It's going to be a $90 million salary cap, but it's really, to me, it's like 82 because I know there'll be 8 guys that'll be, because they all have those. They count on those. Those are the guys either they're young players or they're veteran players that, you can sign that. And, they've that's how they make their salary caps work, is counting on that. Okay, we're going to have 8 guys like that, so which is why I always said the average salary is a little bit misleading because it should be the average of those guys that aren't the $1 million players. You
Right.
know,
They should be excluded. I agree.
you exclude all those guys and then figure out.
Contract guys, get the rookie contract guys out of there too, because they're obviously a bonus. You know, like they should really be counted in average salaries either, rookie contracts.
Yeah. So I mean, because that's you figure 8 per team, that's 240 players. You know.
I mean, the interesting thing about all these teams at the bottom, going back to Kevin's original point here, is that with that many teams being that bad, we are seeing teams we're already seeing teams like that are definitely going to make the playoffs, and then we're seeing teams that, and then there's a lot of teams that aren't playing well right now. They probably have the worst record. We're going to see like a couple teams with the worst record we've ever seen at American Thanksgiving make the playoffs this year. Like I feel like that's going to happen because there's so many bad teams down there.
So I feel the opposite. I feel like
I'm with Russ.
They better get it straightened out by then, or they're in trouble.
Yeah,
but not everybody can get it straightened out by then. And there's like
I think they're not going to have a chance at making it then. I think it's going to be.
There's only 15 teams that don't make it.
There's a motivation this year for those teams. Like okay, if there wasn't a generational talent in Bedard, I would agree with your point. But if you get to December and this team is sub 500 and they think that even if they make the playoffs, they're not going to really be able to go on a run, they're gonna say forget this, and they're gonna try to go as low as possible to get Connor Bedard.
I'll just go with this. And this is the odds. I'll go with the Tom Rennie led Rangers. Where the first year somebody in the press corps said, hey, you're going to have to win like 22 out of 30 out of the last 30 to make the playoffs. And he goes, yeah, and we're going to do it. And they did do it because they had Jaromir Jagr. So they did it. And he had 125 points.
Right.
It doesn't happen very often. And a lot of these teams that we're talking about, even if they get hot, are going to have to win like 22 of 25, something like that, to be able to make any kind of gains when there's 3 points on the line all the time, and you have the one when you have the loser point.
Yeah, I'm with Russ in terms of I think this year will be a year where we don't have many teams break out of it because you're already getting separation.
Yeah.
And by American Thanksgiving, there are going to be teams that are pretty far out of it, and the teams that are already establishing themselves are pretty good teams. And now we've added to that mix. Like nobody had the New Jersey Devils playing as well. Right. And there are other teams that have stepped up and played, better than we expected. There are maybe some pretenders. Like can Seattle keep this up? I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see. But it feels no. But who knows? I mean, we've seen the Vegas Golden Knights. We spent 6 months expecting them to fall in their first season, and that never happened.
Right.
You never know. But I don't think it's going to be easy for these teams near the bottom to pull themselves out.
Well, no, it's not. But the other thing is though that I look at this is like I tried to find went over the last like 20 seasons. And I couldn't find any teams that were at 30 points at 20 games that didn't make the playoffs. Right. So. And that's an obvious. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious, right? But 30 points. If you have 30 points by 20 games in, it's a guaranteed playoff spot. So in the NHL over the last 20 years, which is crazy in a way. I mean, but that and Boston and Vegas are approaching 30 points. They'll be there.
But this is a different era with when you have a frozen cap. That's the only problem.
Right.
But I still think that New Jersey is almost in the playoffs. Like it's fascinating.
No, please. Last week we would have said Buffalo.
They could have been, but they could be. But they're at now. They're at.
Okay, Eck. What if just normal argument? What if Vanacek drops 5 straight? Who is going to him out of it?
Vanacek's hurt.
He's hurt now. Okay.
Yes. Right now, their goaltending tandem is Akira Schmid and Nico Dawes.
Right. So Eck. You're still willing to say that with those two in net?
But they're 12-3, Russ.
Eck. What he just told you in net, they're going to start dropping some games.
Well, we don't know how long Vanacek's going to be out, right? And but they're still 12-3. I mean,
and Vanacek may be a good goalie. We don't know if he could be a great goalie. So if there's a point where he loses 6 out of 7 at the wrong time of the year, it's going to cost them.
It would just be historical if they didn't make it at this point.
historical because they started 12-3.
We're a
No,
month.
based on 11, but I'm just saying. I went through, like I said,
We're a month into
they're
the
getting close to 30
season.
points in 20 games. They might get 30 points in 25 games. It's like they're looking at like
Which will help them, but they're still.
Wait. Okay,
you know,
so
I'm not ready to go there.
So what you're saying is, and we'll use the counter argument here. If a team is 3-12, or say Anaheim, so they're 4-10-1, are they guaranteed to miss the playoffs?
there is one team.
No, I'm just saying.
There's two teams that have been in that scenario that have made the playoffs. Yes, so it does happen. But you're talking about 16 teams every year that make the playoffs, 16 teams that don't make the playoffs.
But okay,
over 20 years, 2 teams have done that.
I'm talking
playoffs, and the Columbus Blue Jackets.
I'm talking specifically about a team like Anaheim, not exactly Anaheim, but a team like Anaheim. If they're 4-10-1, do you think like it's an 85% chance that they're not going to make the playoffs? Because that's where the New York Islanders were last year, and you kept saying, "Oh, they're going to make the playoffs."
Well,
No.
the one thing I would tell you is till a few. It's been a while now, maybe 10 or 12 years. Everybody said it was Thanksgiving. We at USA Today went through every year, and actually it was Halloween. Like you could, it was 80% or better to get. I mean, there was only 20% chance if you were out that you were going to get in the playoffs if you were out of a playoff spot by Halloween, and we're already beyond that.
Yeah.
So I don't those statistics, because especially now, I think are going to be a little bit even harder to make it than X statistics, because as Russ pointed out, and I think it's very true, the parity that we have had in this league has been eroded by this cap messiness. So I just think that it will be harder. It's going to be hard to dig your way out. If you're in the bottom, you're not. I don't know that you're coming back, or at least not very easily.
No. So. And in a similar way, I think it's harder to fall out. I think that's also the case. I really think.
Well, I mean, you got to keep winning. You got to still do that, and I mean, you can't argue the boys' point about if your goaltending just goes bad by bad luck.
Yeah,
that's just the way it goes. I mean, you don't continue to win because you won earlier. You still got to have the horses. So if their horses all get sick or get injured or go lame, they're gonna struggle. So
just think about it this way: the Devils are 12-3, and there are 4 teams within 5 points of them.
Right. No, that's true. And this is the argument that I'm always. You guys know that I'm arguing the opposite. And Mike pointed out that I'm arguing the opposite of what I usually do here, which is like that. I do believe that the teams can always make it back in, and I've always been a fan of that. That I'm just saying, and I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm just saying that it would be crazy if it did for the first time in 20 years happen to the Devils. Like that, and that I think that's worth mentioning. Like it's like they might be the first team in 20 years for it to happen to.
I mean, it's like the statistics that the Blues overcame in order to win the Stanley Cup. Like that was a once in a history of the league occurrence.
Right, that was crazy.
So those kinds of things can't happen, but they're not, very, very likely.
Yeah, they can happen, which is what I'm saying about Devils. It's not very likely that they're going to miss the playoffs. I mean, based on what it is possible.
Yeah,
they just got a hot start, and that their goalies are going to fall apart, and they're going to give up all kinds of goals, and they're not going to be able to score goals anymore. But they're not just goaltending right now.
Yeah,
they are actually.
But but Mike can help us on this. But I do believe that a few years ago, Buffalo had a string early in the season where they won like 10 in a row, or 9 out of 10, or 10 out of 11, something like that. Yeah. And it looked like they were off and running, and they didn't make the playoffs. But
it was a couple of years ago, the Flyers won 10 in a row, and it didn't matter.
No, I know they won 10, lost 10, and won 10 in the same season.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
No, but I think, but I'm talking about the 30 game mark. Okay, so I'm saying like right now, like we're at like the 18, 19 game mark, right? Somewhere in there, like 12,
16, 17 game
16,
mark.
17. All right, so we're in there in that area. So we're about halfway to that 30 game mark. So I'm saying that I'm not, and Thanksgiving is only 10 days away, so American Thanksgiving is coming up next week, right? So I'm a little bit like this is going to be like early December, basically. But well, I'm saying there seems to be a thing about 30 points at 20 games that gets you in the playoffs, guaranteed.
Ironically, it was around this time of year, so it was 2018 season. The Sabres won 10 games in a row. They were 17-6-2 on the 27th of November. Okay. Then they lost 5 games in a row. So,
Right.
and
They
they
didn't get to 30 points in 20 games.
I'm sorry, what was
They
that?
didn't get to 30 points in 20 games then.
No, they in 25 games they had 36 points.
Yeah, but in 20 games.
In 20 games they had 26 points.
So
Right.
heck, you track it. I'm just not buying it.
I'm
But
just
track
saying.
it.
I mean, it's listen. I hate these kind of statistics like anyone else, but I'm just saying it's something to note. Like it's something that is out there. Like
So 30 points in 20 games. So that's 120 point pace or
Right.
better. So
right.
And nobody does
how
that.
many teams actually have done that?
Quite a few.
Like
Like,
8?
I was going through it, like, and it does happen. It really does. Like, I'll come up with the exact number. I'll write it all out for you guys.
Well,
but
okay.
they actually.
I mean, that's a lot of points. 30
Tampa-
points.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. But the Devils are on pace to do it. Is what I'm saying, and they are on.
Yeah, but okay.
They're on pace to do it.
They're not
They
going
got
to
24 points in because they're 12-3, so they've got 24 points in 17 games.
They're not going to do it with third and fourth string goaltending, which they are right now. 2018-19, Tampa Bay had 128 points. In
Right.
So there can't be that many teams that have done that. So
No, you don't
Florida
keep this
did-
pace up over the
Florida
season.
did one-
I mean, that's keeping the pace up over the season. No, that you're not going to get 30 points
Florida
every
did
game.
122 last year. Colorado didn't. Colorado was 119.
right.
I'm not talking about getting 20 points, 30 points every 20 games this season. I'm just talking about
no,
the first.
no,
20
he's talking about that. But I would be. It'll be fun to find out how many teams. I would
I'll
say
find out for you.
that it can't be that many.
Yeah, it's not that many. It isn't.
Yeah,
it isn't.
I
And that's
mean,
what,
yeah.
It isn't that many, but that's what's kind of remarkable that the Devils are on pace. That's why I'm saying the Devils, who we all think can't make the playoffs, or we assume
Yeah.
couldn't make the playoffs, are
Yeah.
on that pace. Vegas and Boston are on that pace. Those are the 3 teams. I think the Islanders are off that pace slightly, but I think those are the only 3 teams. Maybe Winnipeg is. I'm not sure if Winnipeg's on that pace or not.
But this leads to another interesting discussion about, we used to, we throw around, like for injuries, 4 to 6 weeks, and rebuilds 3 to 5 years. We tend to generalize, in sports. It's
Right.
especially reporters do that a lot. But it seems to me now rebuilds take a lot longer now than we ever have discussed.
Yeah.
I mean, you look around the league, and there are teams that are rebuilding that have been rebuilding a very, very, very,
very slowly.
Yeah, like Ottawa.
I mean, by all definitions, Steve Yzerman has done a great job of rebuilding this team, and he's not anywhere close.
We talked about this right at the beginning of the season. I remember we talked about
Yeah,
this on the show.
he
We're like,
is not even close. And
yeah.
you look at that team, like they've shown improvement, but they've had 2 games where they've given up 8 goals already. They gave up 6 goals in the third period. We're talking about some of the same things we were talking about last.
The Ranger game was ugly. It turned out.
Yeah, and it's just amazing me how long it takes. Like, I saw there was a guy on radio talking about the NFL, and he was a math guy, and so he had all the statistics. And like, how long do you think he says it takes a rebuild in the NFL? On average,
5 years.
3 years.
3 years, yeah.
3 years. He says in 3 years, and in the second year whether you're headed in that direction.
Yeah.
Like if you're not at a certain point in that second year, you're not going to make it.
Because it's all the quarterback in the NFL. If you get the quarterback, it's easier to
And not
Well,
guaranteed.
this was more on wins. How many wins you get in that second season? But no, it's not all the teams make it, but that's the average.
Right.
And you look around the league, and there are teams that have kind of turned it around quickly, and those who haven't. Well, in hockey, after 5 years, you're still, treading water, still trying to make it.
The best team right now that built themselves out of a rebuild. Think about that. Like I'm trying to think about that myself. Like the best.
Well, I mean,
team
the Rangers, but they had some cheating areas where Panarin wanted to play there and Fox wanted to play there.
Right.
Toronto and Edmonton.
Yeah,
they're both still not there yet either, right? So,
but they've made the playoffs,
right, and they're
no,
offensive teams.
I
so
don't
they
know
can do
that I
something.
could, the playoffs, but I think they've arrived. I mean, they're contenders.
Right.
Like, you're not
they're contenders, but how many years did that take?
forever.
Forever.
Edmonton won. You got McDavid with Toronto.
No, they didn't win. They went a lot of years without winning with McDavid.
Toronto made the playoffs once in 12 years before they drafted Matthews, and they've made the playoffs every year since.
Right, but Matthews wasn't the beginning of their rebuild.
Yes, he was.
No, they were trying to get they tried to get McDavid before that. They tried to get other players before that.
They started the rebuild in January of 2015 after they fired Randy Carlyle, and they tanked the rest of that year, got Marner 4th overall, and then tanked the following year for Matthews. So if you want to say it was 14, 16 months, okay.
All right, so it's been 8 years. They've had a rebuild.
Here's what I want to say about like Detroit as an example. So if it were just about being good in the standings, Yzerman can do it faster than he's doing it.
Right.
But he's also made sure he's had the right management. He's made sure he's got the right player development. He's making sure he has one of the best farm systems. Like, he wants to be loaded for a long time. Right. And so that's why he's willing to do it that way, because he has seen that the teams that do that can last a decade that way.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, you're sort of, no one complains more about the setup that the Maple Leafs have than you. In terms of they haven't put all their money equally balanced on defense and everything. I think the people that are really going hard after the rebuild, I would put the Sabres in that class. At least to me, it seems like what they're trying to do. Yeah. Are doing just what Russ said, where Yzerman is trying to get the right draft picks. He's also he's not, thus far he hasn't re-signed Bertuzzi or Larkin. He's holding the line on that because he's got Raymond coming. He's got Cider coming. He's going to have to pay. He's sort of got it all figured out. Yeah. So your definition of rebuild, I wouldn't use that because
there's a balance. There's a balance there with Yzerman, Cav, because he drafts Cider, he drafts Edvinsson, but he also drafts Raymond. He drafts Casper this year. They go out and they've signed defensemen and forwards and traded for a goaltender in free agency. There is a balance there. With Toronto, forward, Tavares.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't say that the rebuild was over when they made the playoffs. No. And so I wouldn't say that it was 16 months for them. I'd have to look at it to see when I felt like they're, to me, it's when they felt like they had a chance to win.
Well, I would say it would probably be the third year under Babcock, because the first year they were happy to get to the playoffs against Washington and they lost. They got to 7 games against Boston and they lost. Then the third year, I think they thought they could beat Boston, and then Kadri screwed them with the stupid suspension, and that killed them. So it took it, but they added their number one goalie that first year in Anderson. They added their number one center in Matthews. They had the core group without Tavares that first year. So if you want to say that first year they were just happy to make the playoffs, fine. But when they add Tavares, then the onus was on them to win, because they had a number one and a number two center, probably the best combo in the league with Tavares and Matthews.
Yeah.
The only thing is what they have done a little wrong, Toronto, is they've had to piece together what failed in the draft with free agents, and it's an imperfect science. Like,
yeah,
they're cobbling together.
My point was not to criticize anybody's way, and I was just trying to get a handle on. And I would just say that I think Yzerman has done a good job, but he's not there yet. And I just think it takes a lot longer. And maybe Toronto is an exception.
What about New Jersey?
The Oilers obviously rebuild took forever.
Right.
And New York's, they got lucky. Panarin wanted to come there. And when they never stripped it down.
No, not 100%. No,
they never stripped it down. And unlike some of these other teams, Kev, they had a potentially a generational goaltender who they cultivated over 3 or 4 years that stepped in at the absolute right time, right as Lundqvist was retiring. That was perfect for them.
Yeah,
that Ottawa trade trading them Zibanejad was one of the worst trades in the last 10 years.
Right, true.
Yeah, no, and they got the lottery pick and all that, but I just think the fans really don't quite understand really how long rebuilds take.
I agree.
That's true.
Buffalo,
Unless you get really, really lucky.
If you're at the point of tanking, you're probably 5 years away from the playoffs.
Yeah.
You're longer. You're longer. If
You know,
you're,
if you're
if
talking
you're at
about
the
I want
point
to
of
tank, you're probably
tanking,
5
like,
years away.
if it's your first year, like you're tanking this
Yeah, right.
year,
Right.
then you're 7 or 8 years away.
yeah, but if
The problem is that not all first overall picks are created equally.
Right. That's the
Some
other
are
problem.
created more equal than others, like Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid.
Right.
Right. Like some years you get first year. You know, I'm not, you know, and again, I'm just and nothing. He's a good player, but he's not like, you know.
you could say Buffalo hit it big when they had Reinhardt second overall in 2014, Eichel second overall in 2015. They had other good players around them. And they had bad coaching. They made bad free agent decisions, and those guys rotted on the vine because the organization didn't put them in a right position to win. Now, in their third rebuild in the last 11 years, they're actually getting it right because Power's really good. Dahlin's pretty good.
Yeah.
They have young players. They're developing. They're not there yet, but they're closer. And I think here's
the luck part though, Mike. There is a luck factor.
Yes,
the
definitely.
luck factor is two of their top picks, those number one guys, were defensemen. If they weren't, then they wouldn't be as good right now either.
Agreed.
Right, and they was like, you know, but they built from, you know.
And it took 4 years for one of them to get to where he is, but that was because of bad coaching and bad.
Yeah, the coach plays a major factor in the rebuild. Obviously, you know, if you're going to rebuild, way more teams retool. You know, like I would say Colorado's a retool, right? Tampa Bay
retools. I mean, let's face it. After
Tampa
a certain amount of time, everybody retools.
Tampa Bay is a retool. I mean, the Florida was a rebuild, right? Florida, you could say, was a rebuild in a way. I mean, they like you said, they changed everything.
By the way,
Flyers are going through one of the worst retools I've ever seen. So
yeah, they tried to retool last year, and now they're still kind of trying to retool now, right?
By the way, I just looked it up. After the 20-game mark, the two teams that ended up in the Stanley Cup final, one had 21 points, the other had 27 points. So neither one of them were 30 points, and they both got to the same.
No, the opposite does. I mean, you don't have to have 30 points, but what I'm saying is, if you do have 30 points in 20 games, you're in.
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, I get that you can have you can be around 500 if you're around 20, 25 points in 30 games, you're okay. But if you're at 20, but you know, if you have 30 points in 20 games, you're.
I think in the last 5 years, you're probably talking about 5 teams.
I'll find out for you guys for sure. I mean, I'm doing 2 little projects. One, and funny, you guys kind of touched on one of the other ones, Kevin, which you did, which I thought was great. One of the other research projects I did while I was sick, and I've gone through this a lot, was like to go through and find out who has the best roster of players that are playing on their current squad under $1 million. Like, you know, I went going through that'll be on my blog in a couple of days. We can just maybe discuss that the next podcast or something.
Probably a team with a lot of young players like Anaheim, because they're all on rookie contracts.
That have that, yeah, and it's
it won't be them because they're in last place.
Right, the record's not good. That's the problem.
Talking about teams that are making really good teams are doing well with those players, and you know, because that makes.
I mean, depending on when you do this report, Arizona's passing in that grade right now.
Yeah,
right. They are. And the last thing I want to throw out there was a weird, and this is highly crazy and this is bizarre. But what are the thoughts? And someone threw it out to me, and this is not from any connection I have or anything like that, but just a discussion topic, a thought for a second before we go. Of could Bobrovsky be traded for Erik Karlsson? All right, and the thought was, you know, we're looking at 11.7 for Erik Karlsson, 10.5 for Bobrovsky. Could that?
What's the motivation for San Jose?
Yeah.
Well, San Jose would have to get a lot more, I think, obviously. But is there when we talk about those players not like Bobrovsky not being tradable? How?
I mean, the motivation for San Jose would be because Bobrovsky or Karlsson has 4 more years at 11.5.
Yep.
Bobrovsky has 3 more years at 10. So you'd be saving 11. You'd be saving $24.5 million.
Yeah, but Karlsson's playing good right now, and Bob isn't.
Right.
But he's playing great right now. And I mean, but if he's not playing great, 11.5 is virtually impossible to move west. You know?
Right. But I'm willing now to say that San Jose is not going to want to do that based on that layout.
Would Florida want to do that too? I mean, that's.
Right.
A lot of
I
money.
don't want to either, based on history.
It's a big. We know that Florida, has too much money spent on goaltenders right now. Obviously, but at the same time, we know that, I tend to believe from just things I've heard is that they have a way of moving Bobrovsky. I don't know what that way could possibly be, and I no one's giving me any tips.
Listen, the problem with Florida is they're not even the contender they were last year yet, and I'm not sure they will be.
It's called retaining salary. That's how they.
That could happen for sure, but
look at Florida. Like they're
not worried about that.
Not the same team.
The thing that Florida, I think that they realized last year was that winning in the regular season, winning in the playoffs are two different teams.
Right.
And I think that what they're doing, they're taking a step back right now to be a better playoff team. And I think that's
but they're going to struggle to make the playoffs. That's the problem.
I think they will, but I think they might.
Especially with the again, no, Ekblad is back, but especially with the defense that your number 2 defenseman is Brandon Montour, and he's at best a 4, and your number 3 defenseman is Gustav Forsling, who in Chicago was a 6. So I mean, they really their defense, their defense is not good. They're going to have to upgrade it, and I get the point in terms
they're
of
not a lock for the playoffs.
They're not a lock. No,
no, they aren't. No one's saying they are. But I'm just saying it.
Last year they were a stone cold lock, and I get what you're saying about the playoffs. But I say the same thing. You got to get to the playoffs.
No, you do. But I think that at least they believe. Like we've seen other teams. We've seen the Penguins make this move before. Get worse in the regular season to get better in the playoffs. They have done this.
Yes, but the Penguins have foundational players that no other team has in this league.
Right. No, I know, and that's a great point. But it's not unprecedented to see a team do this.
Yeah. And this is the thing with Bob that somebody in the chat made the point.
Right.
Why would Bobrovsky want to leave Florida with no state tax, making $10 million a year? He's got a no move clause until July of 2024. So good luck. It's not happening.
No, I don't think it's happening either. I'm just
what you got to appreciate about Mike is he can get angry over teams that he has no connection to whatsoever. Like just angry over, this is unbelievable.
Very true.
We do need to talk about Torts for a minute because it's starting to pick up a lot of traction locally here, even with teams doing well, like the Eagles. Torts is getting attention for the wrong reasons. Now, we could all say, hey, there's things that we expect that John Tortorella is going to do, but he made a big blunder yesterday because when he was saying, I don't care about what you guys, and meaning the media and even fans, what you say about this team or what you do. I know we gave the effort in that game, and that's all I care about. They lost 5-1. They gave up a shorthanded goal on the power play, and after they did that, the team was dead. I don't know what game he was watching, but yesterday what Torts was doing tactically was just defending the Torts system and the way he's doing things, and it was a bad day to do it, and people noticed.
Yep. I think it's calculated.
That's none of your business, Russ. So
I know.
I think it's calculated. I said it before. Like I said, him walking out before you weren't here for the podcast when we talked about this last, Kevin. But it's like I said, him walking out of that thing before, calculated. It's like the team. We don't know
but it didn't help the team. They've lost 3 games in a row.
Kev,
what is he going to do? He's going to sit there in Philadelphia where people are going to want to call for the GM's head. The dogs are now fighting. Like
I was going to say they'll get the quote out of
the
dogs will get the quote out of Tortorella.
Right. Not to talk to the dogs.
They believe me. They have the attitude to do it. But so the one dog now is hiding underneath me. So they are. There's no question that Torts is he's going to say stupider things the worse the Flyers play because that's what he does, right? That is a calculated move on his part to take the attention.
Nobody in town's falling for it. Basically, what they're saying is we get what he's doing here, but if he's going to be like this all year, it's going to get old, and they're right.
I mean, okay, this is a distraction tactic from a team that's struggling. I'll take all the attention on myself. Okay, that can last for a little while. But in the end, you need the team to be successful. And if they're not successful, then the organization is going to suffer because they lied about this team being successful.
Yes.
That's the whole point.
Did anybody say to him, it's exactly my business? I'm in the business of trying to find out what's going on with the team. And when you don't talk to it, it's my business to go out and try to find out why. So,
Kevin, do the writers, if you're like the president of the Professional Hockey Writers Association, do you get calls about this kind of thing?
No, not for that. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, either he can talk or, you don't. I mean, you don't have to. There's no rule that says you have to answer every question. You just have to show up.
Right. So he definitely got fined by the league, and the league definitely didn't say what it was.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about when he said none of your business. But
no, I know.
Oh yeah, when you don't show up, it's for sure. Yeah, you got to show up.
You got to get fined. Yeah. But that was a calculated move too. He knew he was going to get fined, so but he calculated.
He got fined. I pointed out that the standard, John's standard that he set was he got fined $25,000 when he had only 2 short answers. So for 2 short answers, it's $25,000. So for not showing up, could be $100,000.
I don't think so, but it could have been. Yeah,
could have been. But he'll take it because it's a part of his plan. And I'm not saying it's right, but or whether it'll work. But that's he's not.
Right now it didn't work because they've lost.
He's no spring chicken. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he knows what all these. He knows what the reaction is going to be.
Okay, but all right. So here's the bigger argument. In the past, he knew what he was doing. In Columbus, he made the playoffs once, right?
Yeah, no, I know.
Okay, and that was a big deal for that franchise.
Yeah.
For the Flyers, that's not a big deal. Yeah. And there is a point where you have to say, if he thinks he can do it exactly the same way he did it everywhere else, even though he's talked about the league changing and he hasn't really changed much yet, that could be a problem for him. And we can't just automatically say this is a guarantee that it's going to work.
Oh, no way. And I think he's trying to find his Larry Brooks, too. Like, he's trying to find his Philadelphia version of Larry Brooks.
Maybe.
He wants somebody to take him on so he can have that straight-up feud.
That's probably true.
Are you up for it, Russ?
I'm not up for that.
It's not going to be Bill Meltzer because, that's not Meltzer.
No, Meltzer doesn't do it either, and I won't.
I'm not going to fall for that. And no one really will here. I don't think anybody.
Sam will get close, but he won't do it.
It'll probably be somebody from I don't know, from the Inquirer.
You need Panaccio back. Yeah,
Panaccio would be the one to do it.
This is almost worth bringing Panaccio out of retirement, finding him saying, we got to get the band back together. He's got to come back, because this would.
What would happen? Panaccio
made Tortorella. Oh my God.
Panaccio would be grinning while Torts walks in the room, and then that Torts would attack that grin without him even asking a question. That would be the start of it.
Yeah, that's true. But don't you think he loved the Larry Brooks thing? Don't you think Tortorella that was?
I think he loved it. The third time. I don't think he loved it when Larry was just covering the playoffs and he was with Tampa. He definitely didn't love that. And I don't think he loved it the second time, but I think the third time, I think that's when he loved it.
Kevin, what are your thoughts? Do you think?
I think that sounds like a pretty good assessment. After a while, it became, almost a caricature. So
it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's not. I mean, you're right. You can only go this well so many times. You're right about that. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes. But for now, it's like people are freaking out about this. Don't forget about it. It's okay. Tortorella's not lost his mind yet, right, guys? All right, folks. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. I got to go break up the dogs before we have instigation penalties going on each way. Remember, without the buzz, just hockey. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.